today with a musical event. We're all spaced out here. All right. We got some rain sticks. We got some horns. We got a little key rattle. Some scrap from the scrap bin. And a beautiful piece of quartz. And then we have a piece of quartz here that we're going to be playing. And I'll try to social distance. All right. So I think we're going to start off with the quartz there if you want to start walking through. Okay, horns. Everybody else, go ahead. Yeah, thank you, Mike. Evil spirits be gone. So if you take my classes in different places, you will make musical instruments. And if you notice, some of our instruments were out of quartz. So, if we have a percussion instrument, we usually do that out of quartz. And then any kind of other instruments could be soft glass or borosilicate. I'm going to start today by making a daffodil. I just want to kind of pull this out really quick. If you haven't heard about it, we have an exhibit up at the Fuller Museum, Glass Life Forms. And who here is in Glass Life Forms? Anybody? No? Okay, there we go. Yeah, so we have catalogs. You can come get a catalog later. And you can look through these catalogs. The Glass Life Forms show is kind of the representation of Blaschka's work, but done by today's artists. And you can come up here and look through this catalog later on. There will be a reception at the Fuller Museum, I think the first weekend in April. So since we have that exhibit going, I thought I would do a flower. And then later we'll do a horn on the lathe. So if you look at the screen over there, you can see the prep work that I did. So a lot of times what I do is I coat the tube, and I do that myself. So you can buy tubing that's already colored, but I go ahead and do it myself. Today, I'm using this one. This was coated with yellow, and then I think I use Egyptian white, and then yellow again. And it just gives me the idea of lines and growth in the petals. So yesterday I came in and I made all these petals, and then I forgot to anneal them. But I think they'll be all right. Let's see. And this is the stem. And I know a daffodil stem is straight, and it's all one color. But what I did here is I mixed the colors, and I kind of pulled it so that it had a little bit of dimension to it. Sometimes I use, we could pass this around too. Sometimes I use hollow stems, depending on what it's going to be and where it's going to be displayed. If I want something really light, I'll just go with a hollow stem. Oh, I forgot to pull the stamens. Haha. I'm sorry. One thing I forgot. So I'm going to start by putting the stamens in this piece. Then we're going to do a ring seal with this piece right here. And then we'll put on the petals. Just going to build this up maybe just a little bit more. And if you have any questions while I'm working, you can go ahead and ask them. I think being from scientific, we work a lot more with standard wall. I think you could probably use anything. So I want to get really good seals here because I won't be able to go back in here afterwards. So here I'm just using a white that's covered with yellow. And sometimes these move around when I put the other ones on, but we'll straighten them all out in the end. So I'm going to tell you a story. When I was little, I think I was around 15, Lloyd taught me how to open up tubing so that we could make sails for ships. We could make drapery, you know, like if you were making clothing on a figure, and things like that. And I started making flowers by opening up tubing. And Lloyd was the only person I knew doing glass. And so I figured, oh, I'm the only one who's doing this. And I actually told the gallery, oh, nobody else is making glass flowers like this. And I can't believe they believed me. And so I sold them, I think, a dozen daffodils, a dozen wildflowers, and a dozen roses, with them thinking that I was the only one making glass flowers. I later realized the glass flower exhibit at the Ware at Harvard, and I was so embarrassed. So I just want to say we may think that we're inventing something, but it probably has been done before. And if you just go through the Corning Museum of Glass, you will usually find, you know, techniques that have been done in the past. We just may do it differently. So I'm just going to make these all the same size and kind of bring them together a little bit more. It's got a little kink in this one. Try to straighten that out. And then I'll put maybe something on the end. Let's see. Can I grab another color? I'm sorry, I should have had all this out. This on there. But that's a really poppy color. You know, I think that might be soft glass. I'm sorry. You know, I'll just use green. That's all right. Just put a little something on the ends of these. I sometimes get my glasses mixed up a little bit. So just a little something on the ends of those.
Sally, would you say you mostly work in boro or 50-50 mix?
Probably 50-50. Well, if you, no, I should say mostly boro and some quartz at work. But in my work, 50-50. Because I'm working a little bit more with George now. So I'm going to take off my mask just for a little bit, sorry. Hopefully the flame will take care of everything. So here I say, please don't break, please don't break, please don't break. And Jake Fishman taught me that mantra. So again, sometimes the stem is hollow. And if it was a hollow stem, I would put just a little air hole there. So that I could blow through the whole thing. So I'm just going to get this hot. Bring that down onto the ring. I'm going to keep the heat mostly onto the solid piece because it's going to take a lot longer to heat that up. So ring seals are something that scientific glass blowers do like all the time. Should I tell another story? So one time Beth Hyland and I went down to Florida to see our friend Katie Coleman blast off and go up to the space station. Neither of us got to see the blast off because they had delays, and after 2 weeks I said, I gotta go. But she finally got up there. But while I was down there, I visited Robert Mickelson, and we did some work together, and I showed him a ring seal. And he really liked it. He thought it was wonderful. What year was that, Beth? Do you remember? 90s, early 90s. And so he did a video, and he included a ring seal in it. And then he called me up later and he said, Sally, I did the video and I forgot to, say that you invented the ring seal. I was like, that's really good because it's been around for a couple, 100 years. So here I want to really work out that seal. So I'm letting that sink down, and I'll blow it out quite a few times. And I'm just praying that my stamens are doing all right inside of there because we can't really see them. And then I'll come up here and I'll open this up. And the way I'm going to open this is I'm just going to stretch this out. And since I'll have a closed piece now, when I heat this up, it kind of opens up. Actually, it opened up already. And we'll peel away the extra. So I think the Blashkas used a lot of different techniques in making their flowers. But I think this was one way. Now before I go any further, I'm just going to put some little heat in here and try to straighten up those stamens. I think they used a lot of mold making. I think Victor Trebruco is really doing some fabulous work on how the Blashkas worked. And he does have a piece in the Life Form show that's outstanding. The stamens kind of moved to a place that I didn't want them to move to, but we'll get it straightened out here. So for the Glass Lifeform show, we had I think 130 entries or so. And we had to choose, there we go, 40, I got them to let me have 53 in the exhibit. Because some of the life forms things were kind of small. We have a mosquito in it. And it's like, you have room for more pieces in the gallery. The Fuller Museum, it was really wonderful to work with. I have put together quite a few shows. Last year I did one for UMass Amherst. It was a virtual show. And that was really nice because you didn't have to ship the pieces. So I made that an international show. So I'm just going to open this up kind of slowly. And I don't really have to worry about that being totally even because we're going to kind of flare the end. The ring seal, I find structurally very stable. When you're putting things inside of things, I find it much better than just tagging something inside of there. I think we'll leave it like, well, yeah. No, a little brighter, sorry. Been a while since I made one of these. It's very quiet. So yeah, I've been making daffodils since I was 15. And I'm 64. So we'll just kind of flutter the end here a little bit. I'm just going to spread those stamens out a little bit more now. And if you notice, I'm always keeping that ring seal warm. And in my head, I have the mantra, please don't break, please don't break, please don't break. So let me lay these out, see which. Another thing that I didn't do yesterday is make an extra petal. Usually I have an extra petal in case something goes wrong, but we're going to go with it. So here I want to make sure that I get a good seal. And for those of you that work a lot of color, you have to get it hotter than you think you need to. So I put it together and I pull a little bit, maybe go in and warm it up. Do we have a hot oven? Is that oven on?
Yes.
Okay. I just thought of that. I usually put these directly into an oven after it's done. Sometimes lately I've been doing flowers that I can take apart. And if you noticed in the presentation last night, you know, I would have a ring of petals with maybe a joint holding it together, if that makes sense. And that way you can ship things a little easier. So I'm kind of warming the whole thing out each time after each petal. Now when I was 15, we didn't have color like this. You guys are so spoiled. Oh, we'd have to, if we wanted color, we had to mix it ourselves. But another thing that Lloyd Moore taught me was how to enamel glass. And so we had a little spray chamber where we would fume or enamel in. Well, I didn't get that one very good. Let's see. Sorry. Sometimes when I'm talking, I kind of miss. So that was a little different time. So our enameling consisted of, it was, you know, those little things that you would make T-shirts with, a little spray bottle. And it would always clog up because your enamels, you'd have to mix them first and try to get them really nice in the solution, whatever solution you were using. And then spray a very light coating of the enamel. And then you would go in and spray another light coating and another light coating, because otherwise it would drip. Oops. Oops. That wasn't good. I should have annealed those yesterday. Actually, somebody said, oh, we have an oven up, Sally. You want to put those in there? Oh, yeah. And then I didn't. Yeah, we'll do a petal. So now that I have them all on there, I just want to make sure that I have really good seals. So I'm just kind of looking to make sure I have any sharp edges I can go in and I'm just going to give it a little bend here. And then if you want to put a glove on to put this in the oven. And of course, if it breaks, we can fix it, right? Now one petal, I'm not sure about it, but anyway, it's a demo, right? Okay, so you want to go ahead and put that in? Yeah, okay, there you go. Okay, so we had a question on making a petal. And do you understand how I got the color on here, everybody? Okay. So I can't remember. Oh, I think this was white with yellow behind it. So it's going to be 2 colors. You know, I work with whatever's around. Isn't this horrible? I come to these conferences, I go, oh, look at that white. That's beautiful. Y'all try that. But with that one, I used the Egyptian white, and I really liked it a lot. I'm not, like, really into perfect color. In fact, I would rather have it a little not perfect, if possible. So the seconds, I'm like, yeah, go for it. Okay, so first I'm going to shape this the way I want. Actually, when I first thought about coming here, I thought, oh, I'll just ask people what they want to see. And then I thought, no, that might be dangerous. So I got a lot of thickness down here. Maybe I don't want to use that part. We'll do something with that later. Kind of separate those two. This looks like a piece of 31 millimeter. I don't know. So when I stripe a whole tube, I usually have my blow hose hooked up. Whoops. To the end of it. And I would just make this pod on the end of it. So you can see that it's fairly thin, like it wants to collapse all the time. I'm like, yeah, that's where I want that. I'm going to stretch this out just a little bit more. Almost uncontrollable. Because the whole idea here to make this with the tubing is so that I can make large petals that are really thin. Otherwise, I would just press them out. Now, depending on what type of petal you're going to make, you would make your shape different. Like if you wanted a rose petal, you want it really fat on the outside, so you would make it fatter up here and thinner down here. So let's do that. So here, this is cold. This, I have a small flame. It's going to be hot. Let me see if I can do it left-handed. Challenge. Okay. So here, I'm just ripping that open. And you can see how the striping of the tubing gives me the quality of life. And yes, I thought when I was 15 I invented this, but I didn't. I think if you look at the lotus flower in the Ware collection, you will see this. So they were using soft glass tubing and soft colors with the same technique. So now I'm going to use a wider flame. I like that really thin edge that I got, so I'm not heating the edge, I'm heating just behind the edge. And I'm letting this open up. And again, that gives me kind of something lifelike. You know, it's not a perfect bubble, it's not a perfect shape. So other things that I've done with this technique is pages for books. When I'm down at the Penland School of Crafts teaching, I try to get all my students to collaborate with the other studios. And once the book people know that you can make a glass page for them, they're very excited. So something you can think about. So I got a little too much glass there on the side. I'm going to just shape that. So if I was going to make a rose, like this is a rose petal, the center of the rose I would have either solid or a tube that I'd make into a bud and then put the petals around it. But you see, there you have something. If you wanted to make this into kind of a frilly orchid petal, you could heat the sides of this and move it around. You know, really make it flowing. You have something thin that wants to flow, so allow that to happen. Okay, I like that. Then I take it off here, and when I take it off, this is going to be my point of attachment. And you can see right now it's pretty thin, so I'm not pulling away right away. I'm letting that kind of thicken up in that area. And thicken it more just by heating and pulling. Oh, you mean okay, so the question is my fuel mix. I work so many different places and so many different gases that I just, whatever works. And you're going to find that you're working at a certain speed. You may need a different fire than what I need. Yeah, it's really, it's kind of hard. I work at Vermont Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I work down at UMass Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So up in Vermont, I'm working with, you know, either methane on the lathe or natural gas on the bench. So there it's a different mix. And down in, you know, UMass Amherst, I'm on propane, and at home I'm on propane and hydrogen. So you just got to, you know, what works for you and what works with the glass. If I'm working a really high lead glass, I go to oxyhydrogen, because then you don't have to worry about, you can have any flame you want and you won't reduce it. So I did turn Josh Simpson on to hydrogen. I'm not sure if that was a good idea. But, you know, he was working on his Saturn pieces, and you know, as a scientific glassblower, sometimes we have those torches that kind of there's two sides. And so I gave him one of those, and then he did a hydrogen-oxygen mix, and his Saturn pieces, that ring between the big sphere and the platter really worked. He got a good seal that way without reducing it. Does that help with that?
Yeah, and also just how you're setting the torch. I was just watching the softness of your flame while you were working.
Oh, yeah, I really like, so the Carlisle, they don't like this. You know, the Herbert Arnold is a really nice torch. You get a nice soft flame with it. So when you're working thin, you want to be soft. You want to be, if you're making a really thin goblet, you want to be soft because you want to heat the inside and the outside. If I had a really sharp flame and I was trying to do a nice thin bushy goblet, that just wouldn't happen, right? I would heat up certain areas much hotter. So the thinner the work you do, the softer the flame you would want. Does that help?
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I work on all different types of torches too, depending on where I am. It's really hard. And when you travel, you know, like a lot of times I go to other countries and we set up, I have no idea what kind of torch they're going to give me. So the first time I went to Japan, oh, look at this torch. You know, how am I going to use this? You know, and Lloyd Moore told me when I was little, it's not the torch, it's the glass blower. So you should never say, oh, this torch, I can't use this torch, right? It's all about, you know, just getting into it and learning the flames of that torch. Yeah. So I don't have a favorite torch. Well, maybe the Herbert Arnold. All right. Okay, we're going to do just a real quick thing on the lathe.
Someone was wondering if you've done flowers like that using furnace glass.
Yes. The question was, can you use furnace glass, soft glass, to make flowers like that? Oh, yes, you can. In fact, I think there's a great demo that was done here by Johnny Toso, who made a soft glass flower. So what you do with soft glass is you go into the hot shop, you pull your own tubing, and then you can make whatever you want, right? And I actually at home have a piece of tubing about this long that Lino made for me. He goes, Sally, I made you this tube. And I still have the tube. And when I die, my family's going to go through my stuff and say, oh, what's this? And throw it out. But so yes, you just have to work differently. You know, every glass is like a different language. So when you move from quartz to, okay, I guess he's got that in there. Wow. To borosilicate, to soft glass, it's the same kind of technique, but you have to just be work a little differently. So for smaller stuff on the lathe, I usually just use a multi-mix like this. We'll see how straight this is. So we're just going to gather this a little bit. I don't know why the torch is. So usually, if you're working on the lathe, kind of start out slow if you're just starting out on the lathe. So what I'm doing here is I'm gathering the glass. Again, I'm working with standard wall. I think this is 54 millimeter. Oh, that wasn't good. Wait a minute. So I usually do the mouthpiece kind of separately beforehand, but we're just going to kind of wing it for this. We're kind of running out of time. It's very similar. It's a very clean gas. If you're doing demos in buildings, sometimes they're going to require you use methane. You know, they're not going to allow a little tank of propane coming into the building. So that it's a nice clean gas, and it comes in the bottles, you know, like your oxygen bottles. And so therefore, your fire marshal is going to think it's a safer way to go. So up in Vermont, they didn't have high pressure gas coming into the glass shop. So when you're working on the, you know, lathe, you have to do something. And so that's what I did. So I'm just going to do a little taper here. And I think that's what Mike Souza uses too. Is he here? So, you know, each gas is just a little different. So here we're going to pull this down to a small constriction. And we'll just make a little horn. Oh. My mouthpiece keeps coming off. Just a second.
Hi, Sally. What's your favorite part about working with George?
Oh my God. Okay, what I like about working with George, the first thing is when I enter the studio, I hear a laugh. Whoa! Right? He can make anything. George, I want to make this. Okay, let's make it. I really like that. One thing we do have disagreements about is the size of things. So I say, hey, let's make this. Let's make it about this big. And he's like, oh, okay. And then we'll be doing a demo in front of the class, and all of a sudden, he's taking 2 or 3 more gathers over it. But he's a lot of fun. He's really, really good. I don't think I have worked, besides Lino, with anybody else that's better. I mean, he can make anything. So if you want to work with George, you should take the class coming up here. If you can't, if that doesn't fit your timeline, you should take the one at Pittsburgh. Both places are wonderful to take classes in. I met George at the Corning Museum of Glass. When they first opened up the studio, they had me come in, and you know, the first year and a half I worked there, and helped them with, you know, who to have as teachers and all that kind of stuff. And so I walked into the hot shop one night just to see what George was doing, and he was making life-size umbrellas, beautiful umbrellas. But he didn't have enough people in his crew to help him. And so I just walked in to see what was happening, and he handed me one of these humongous pieces of glass and said, "Here, hold this, keep this warm, flash it, do this, do that." And we've worked together ever since. But he's really good. If you've watched the, what is it called, Blown Away on Netflix, he did the big egg for Deborah Sarisco. Did you watch that? Yeah. And what happened? The egg could not fit into the glory hole because he made it too big. So that's just George. So we're just going to pull that out. I'm just making a taper for this. I talked to him the other day, and we really want to do more work together. We both really enjoy working together. So, and I've known him for a wicked long time. You know, I've seen his kids grow up, and that's kind of nice. Uh-huh. Yes. So the temperature of your glass instrument will affect the sound, yes. It won't even sound when it's hot. Because things aren't resonating. Things aren't, yeah. So if you watch the demo that I did at Gas, where I did a glass bell, when I rang the bell at first, it didn't ring at all because it was still hot. But then later it had a really nice sound. So I'm kind of rushing that a bit, but that's the mouthpiece. Some of you wanted to go over how to do a flare, so we'll do that really quick. The class that I'll be teaching down at the Pellin School of Crafts will be mostly a lathe class. So this will just be a small flare, but we're going to do a fire cut right here. We got a nice sharp flame underneath. I'm just going to pull that out. It's a little stiffer than. Okay. So fire cuts are nice and clean. You know, if you're doing any seals in chemistry, you would want to seal it up with a fire cut. One of the most important things I try to tell people is to burn this edge down right away. You know, later you'll probably cut that off, but the only time I've had somebody hurt themselves in a lathe class was not doing that and then actually, you know, picking it up out of the tailstock and cutting their tendon actually in there. So that wasn't good. So when I do a flare, I have this torch kind of angled, and the way I like to work with torches so that I can angle the torch where I need the heat. If I had a crossfire down here, it would only be directly up. So here I can angle this torch kind of going on the inside of that tube and also on that edge. So I'm just going to bring this up just a little bit. Then I'm going to use the paddle. I want this edge to be a little thicker because people are going to take this horn and throw it around a little bit, so we'll thicken that up just a little bit. Each time you do that, you would make a thicker edge. So again, a nice soft flame underneath. You could mount your Carlisle on the lathe and angle it like this also. Another way to work. Oops, sorry. So there we have a flare. Last night we were working and we made this flare kind of go a little bit backwards, and so that's kind of fun. We'll straighten that out with a paddle. Just something a little different, right? After you touch something with a graphite or anything, you want to give it just a little more heat because you've chilled it. You know, just don't stop after you touch it with a graphite. Okay, we'll leave it like that. Could be a little straighter. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
quick one, sorry.
Yeah.
I was wondering, bump up the speed of the lathe at all when you were doing that flare. Is there any point in like the size of the flare foot, smaller or bigger, that you would bump up that speed to sort of help, or you don't?
The only time I pump up the speed on the lathe is when I can't use a blow hose and I'm doing a seal. Like if I'm doing a straight seal and it's a large tube and I can't use the blow hose, that's when I use the speed. Other than that, the speed doesn't matter. You know, I have heard that people have tried to flare their feet out by speed alone on the lathe, and I have seen the feet kind of fly across the room. So, you know, you want to be careful with the speed. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so we have a few minutes maybe for questions.
Sally, what body of work are you working on at the moment? Where are you looking to in your own body of work?
Well, George and I are kind of gearing up to do more together. So maybe some more soft glass in my own work. At some point, I am 64. I might retire from one of my jobs, you know, and then maybe do some more work in my own studio. Right now, I have 1 day a week in my own studio. I do work every day. We did have a shutdown when this pandemic hit, and I was out of the universities for a month and a half. And then I went right back. So research continued the whole time. And the glass blowers, as far as I know, all the scientific glass blowers were back at work. Yeah.
Anyone else?
I don't know if it's a silly question, but how would you take that off now?
Okay, how would I take that off? That's a good question, actually. What I do is I take it over to the bench, and I just take it off right there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's hard.
So you can grab it.
Yeah, just let it cool so you can grab it. Because usually my horns are long tapers, so I have a longer lathe. And, you know, there's no way to really grab that nicely in the lathe, so I just do that on the bench. I work a lot on the bench versus the lathe. A lot of times, I was talking to Kiva Ford yesterday. Both of us, it's much faster just to sit down and do it on the bench than to set up the lathe. Yeah.
Hi, I'm a beginner, so I'm not sure if that's an obvious part, but when you were squeezing that little, like the end, did you use tweezers or use another tool?
Yeah, I should have described. So we use graphite tools, and so what I was doing was taking this graphite tool and pressing down as I was blowing. Yeah. And so when I use this tool, I try to keep my elbow into my body so that I keep it really kind of stiff. I Another thing that I think beginners do a lot, they go, okay, I did it, and they take away the tool really quickly. What you want to do is bring it down slowly and then bring it up slowly. So as things are rotating, we're using these graphite tools.
So those are the only tools you use with the lathe, the graphite tools?
Yeah, pretty much so. That's just the way I work. There's 1,000 ways of working, right? Yeah. You have a question?
So everybody can hear.
Want to pass that back?
Yeah.
I was just curious if you've like put much thought into the geometry of the horns in terms of like the taper. Like, have you just experimented, trial and error? Did you do any research before you started?
I did a lot of research, and I worked with musicians. So there's been times where I think the hardest thing I made for a musician was a Baroque flute. And it had a certain taper that they wanted in it. And so, yeah, you do a lot of research. You can carve your graphite to that same taper and then see where you are. I don't use the graphite so much, but I just use it for, gauge.
Did you also have?
I was just wondering, do you ever use jacks on the lathe, or is that too aggressive of a tool?
I don't use jacks on the lathe. I do use jacks on the bench. I didn't use jacks until I started working with Cesare Tofferro. And then I was like, why haven't I done this before? Because I work in the hot shop and I work in the lamp shop, so I'm like, why haven't I done it? But I would worry about ruining my jacks on the lathe. So, yeah.
When you work at the university, how much time do you spend doing research versus actually working on a lathe or a torch?
Oh my God, this is a very good question. Okay, so when I'm working at a university, how much time do I do research and how much time am I on the torch? It depends on the project. Some projects, there was one project I worked 4 years with the client, trying to get the right pressure. It was a piece of quartz. They were putting it into a machine, using pressure and exploding it in 20 seconds, and then we'd get it to 40 seconds, and then we get, so it's a constant thing. They blow me away. They come in every day and they say, Sally, can you make something like this? And then we go back and forth, because a lot of them are from other countries. They don't know what we know as glass blowers. And so you constantly have to go back and forth with them, and they challenge me all the time. So I would say 50% research, 50 on the torch, yeah.
We got another question over here.
We'll get to you.
Sorry.
Let me turn this off.
Are you going to be teaching a class on the glass life forms, like the flower that you were making earlier?
Well, my classes are usually a little different than most people's classes. If you take my class and you say, I don't want to do what you're working on, that's okay. We'll have you work on whatever you want to work on. But the George and I class will be 96 mostly. But, if you take the lathe class down at Penland and you want to work on flowers, you can do that. You can put your flower in a big tube and seal it up on the lathe. Yeah, there was somebody here.
My question was basically the same. I want to take a flameworking class with you. You said your class this June also involves hot shop work, so basically students can just do whatever.
Well,
kind of.
Here, the workshop here is with George, and so we would be doing hot shop flameworking together and combining them. The class that I'm teaching down at Penland will be more lathe bench work, different types of glass.
Thank you.
Yeah.
One more over here.
Thank you for the demo, Sally. Those were awesome. I just have a quick question. What's your favorite tool to use?
My housemate's kitchen knife. I used to live with a lot of different people, and they would always be looking for their knives, and they'd come down to the glass shop, Sally. Yeah, that's my favorite tool. Yeah. Some people use butter knives, you know. Yeah. But a lot of times I'll use that to marver on. You know, it's a nice clean surface. I'm talking like just a knife, you know, like you have your spoons, forks, and knives, that knife. Yeah. It's my favorite tool. And it's interesting to watch people and what they use for tools. One time I was in Japan, and I was watching this very famous bead maker, I forget his name, and he pulled out a trowel. And he was marvering on a trowel. And I was like, so you know, we have all these fancy tools, and they're really nice, but really, what do you actually need? Yeah. Okay, good. All right. Thank you very much for coming.